Huge Wyken cave system. Scientists from the Archaeological Institute of Iceland have discovered an extensive system of man-made caves, the appearance of which is attributed to the Wyken age. According to archaeologists, the caves found in the Odi region were excavated in the middle of the 20th century. The size of the underground system is huge. No studies of such large-scale objects have yet been conducted on the territory of Iceland. To date, a church, a farm, and a priest's house have been discovered here. When Christianity arrived in Iceland around 1000 AD, Odi was one of the first settlements to build a church. One of the caves which was discovered recently could serve as a nata helir, a medieval stall for cattle and horses. Archaeologists believe that the caves in Odi can tell a very large and interesting story. During Wyken times, Odi was one of the most important cultural and political centers in Iceland and home to the powerful Odvajar clan. Samundr the scholar, who wrote the early chronicles of the Norwegian kings, was one of the most prominent members of the clan. The settlement developed into a major cultural and educational center where the patron saint of Iceland, Thorlakur Thorhilsson, was educated at the age of 9. Dinosaur bulldog. Scientists have discovered in Egypt the fossilized remains of an unusual dinosaur with tiny arms and a muzzle like a bulldog. The bones of the dinosaur, which has yet to receive an official name, have been found by experts at the Bahariya oasis in Egypt's western desert. Researchers say the creature was bipedal, meaning it walked on two legs, had small teeth, and very short arms. The predator, whose body length was about 6 meters, roamed the Sahara Desert 98 million years ago. This species belongs to a lizard-like family of abelisauride dinosaurs that flourished during the Cretaceous period, 145 to 66 million years ago, the last time period of the dinosaur era. Abelisaurid fossils have previously been found in Europe and many of the modern continents of the southern hemisphere, but never before in the Bahariya Formation. The discovery is based solely on a well-preserved neck-based vertebrae found during a 2016 National Geographic Society-funded expedition to the Bahariya oasis. This is the oldest known abelisaurid fossil from northeast Africa and shows that during the mid-Cretaceous, these carnivorous dinosaurs lived across much of the northern part of the continent, from east to west, from present-day Egypt to Morocco and further south, in Niger and perhaps even beyond. Abelisaurids were theropods. These dinosaurs are distinguished by hollow bones and three-toed limbs. They walked on two legs. Unfortunately, all of the Bahariya dinosaur fossils collected before World War II were destroyed during the Allied bombing of Munich in 1944. Giant head in the Aegean. A team of European archaeologists and divers found a giant marble head during an underwater expedition at the site of the Antikythera shipwreck in the Aegean Sea. Researchers have identified the head as a Heracles of the Phanes type. According to them, it may belong to a headless statue of a demigod, which was found in the same place in 1900 during a shipwreck. The statue is currently kept in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. 2 human teeth were also found embedded in a hard agglomerate with traces of copper, genetic material that could be analyzed to determine the sex of the person they belonged to. The researchers also found several other artifacts belonging to the ship, such as bronze, iron, and nails, but these can only be identified using X-rays. All items were handed over for conservation to the Ephorate of Underwater Antiquities of Greece. Early Iron Age swords. The swords were discovered during the construction of a new fire station in the Bavarian city of Andechs. These items were funerary. Each sword was buried in a separate grave along with the remains. Swords represent an important transitional stage from the use of bronze to the use of iron in weapons. Both are made of iron, but the earlier one was made in the shape and style of a Bronze Age sword. The later one, made in the same period, had an adapted design to take advantage of the stronger and more stable metal. The swords are 76 and 66 centimeters long and 6 centimeters wide. While the shorter one was probably mainly used as a stabbing weapon in hand-to-hand combat, the longer and heavier one was more suitable as a stabbing weapon that a fighter could wield from above. For example, from a horse. At the Bavarian State Heritage Office in Munich, a team of restorers cleaned the swords using microfine shot blasting technology and examined them more closely. The restorers managed to find traces of a horn on one of the so-called hiltons, and the hilt was probably made from this material. Two blades also contained the remains of a layered linen weave fabric, as well as the remains of a cord that must have been wrapped around it in several places. Presumably, the weapons were wrapped in cloth and buried. Mummy mammoth with wool and claws. Canadian gold miners found a mammoth baby mummy in the Klondike gold mines, Yukon Territory. The remains of a baby woolly mammoth have lain in the permafrost for over 30,000 years. Scientists determined that this is a female and gave her the nickname Nanchoga, which means big cub in hang. The body of the baby mammoth is perfectly preserved, even its claws and wool remained intact. Further analysis revealed that the female lived alongside the wild horses, cave lions, and giant prairie bison that once inhabited the area. Now the body of the mammoth is in the laboratory. Scientists are going to examine it and conduct analysis. The Yukon has always been famous for Ice Age finds. Paleontologists are delighted with this amazing find. Nanchoga is one of the most incredible Ice-aged mummified animals ever discovered in the world. Archaeologists can't wait to explore it and make discoveries. Experts determined that the baby was about the same size as a 42,000-year-old woolly mammoth named Luba, discovered in Siberia in 2007. The existence of woolly mammoth in Canada's Yukon Territory has long been known, but 2021 research shows that they roamed there even 5,000 years ago. In the early Holocene, the environment in the Yukon changed dramatically due to climate change. For this reason, mammoth began to disappear from this territory. The oldest traces of human life in the Arctic. Modern humans lived in the Arctic 40,000 years ago at the beginning of the late Paleolithic. This was found out by examining the bone remains of animals found in the archaeological complex in the Lower Ob. It is believed that a man of the modern type ended up in Europe and Asia 50–60,000 years ago, but scientists do not know where he lived before and how he passed the Ural Range. For a long time, it was believed that in the period 12–30,000 years ago, the north of western Siberia was covered by a glacier, and therefore it is pointless to look for archaeological traces in this region. In 2020, at the Kushevets site, in the deposits of an ancient stream, a cultural horizon full of bones was discovered, stretching for tens of meters. The stream existed for 20–40,000 years. Now it has shifted down several meters. There are interesting finds that archaeologists periodically date. In particular, 2 deer antlers with traces of processing were found. This is the first discovery in this region, indicating the presence of men in this area 40,000 years ago. To determine the age of the finds, scientists use the method of accelerator mass spectrometry. This is an ultra-sensitive method of isotopic analysis in which a careful selection of the atoms of a substance is carried out with isotope counting. It allows you to date organic objects with an accuracy of up to 50 years. This work will allow us to understand the migration routes of people in the Paleolithic era and find out how people settled on the Earth. The complex language of communication in chimpanzees. Chimpanzees use a fairly rich language to communicate, the words of which they are able to combine into sentences. Experts from the Max Planck University of Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany found out. The researchers analyzed almost 5,000 conversation recordings, totaling about 900 hours, between adult chimpanzees in the Tyne National Park in Côte d'Ivoire. They were able to isolate 390 unique vocal sequences. Although it was obvious before that the sounds made by chimpanzees carry certain information, such a wide range of vocalizations came as a surprise to scientists. Vocalizations were both single and combined into chains of several and combined in different ways. In total, scientists have identified 12 different types of vocalizations, including grunts, lowing, and whining. The use of vocalizations was influenced by the context. For example, a single grunt of a chimpanzee was published at the side of food, and a series of grunts more like a pant as a sign of a submissive greeting. Although the chimpanzee language is poorer than the human language, it turned out to be much richer and more diverse than previously thought. There are probably more possible combinations and sounds in it than we have been able to identify. Scientists hope that further research into the language of monkeys will help to learn more about the origin of language in humans. Milk teeth of young Neanderthals. 3 human milk teeth found in the Spanish cave of El Castillo belong to Neanderthals. Approximately 80,000–60,000 years ago, people of the modern anatomical type left Africa. They were carriers of the Upper Paleolithic archaeological culture. Approximately 40,000 years ago, they ended up in Europe, where for several millennia they coexisted with the Neanderthals living there. They finally disappeared 41–39,000 years ago, but scientists still do not have a final answer in what form their coexistence took place, but it is known for sure that the Neanderthal culture influenced the ancestors of modern people. Milk teeth were found in cultural layer 18, dating back to the transition from the Middle Paleolithic to the Upper Paleolithic. A more accurate analysis showed that the layer was 44,940–42,110 years ago. Scientists concluded that the teeth belonged to 2 or 3 children of indeterminate sex, aged from 4–5 to 9–11 years. They noted that the teeth were found in what is thought to be a butchery area. The children probably lived nearby and not necessarily at the same time. The features of these teeth have allowed paleoanthropologists to identify them as Neanderthal. Moreover, one of the teeth, the upper milk incisor of a child of 4 or 5 years old, did not fall out naturally, but as a result of an injury. Exquisite artifacts from 3,000 years ago. A team of archaeologists from China discovered 6 so-called sacrificial pits. The finds were made on the territory of the famous archaeological site, Sangshandu settlement in the southwest of the country. Artifacts speak of the imagination and skill of the people who lived there between 1600 and 800 BC. The Sangshandu culture is named after a fortified settlement that was located on the upper reaches of the Yangtze River. Archaeologists suggest that here, in the 2nd millennium BC, was the first center of the kingdom of Shu. Ruins with an area of about 12 kilometers square were discovered by chance in the first half of the last century. To date, more than 50,000 relics have been discovered during the excavations of the monument. However, no written sources or human remains have yet been found. The most unusual finds were a box depicting real and mythical reptiles, a statue of a man with a snake's body, and a sacrificial altar about a meter high. It was also located in one of the pits where ancient people dropped their offerings to the sun, sky, earth, and deceased ancestors. The bronze sculpture of the half-snake, half-human is obviously made in full growth, 160 centimeters. The central part, with the body of a snake, the head of a man with bulging eyes, and a large fangs, is mounted on a jug, which in turn is on a square tray. On the monster's head is the painted vessel. The 3 parts of the composition belong to 3 different cultures. The tray belongs to the Zhou tribe from northwest China. The jug belongs to the inhabitants of the middle and lower reaches of the Yellow River of that time, and the sculpture itself belongs to the Shu kingdom. The relic proves the important role of Sangshandu in Chinese civilization and close ties with other ancient cultures. Prehistoric Swiss knife. South African archaeologists have found that mid-Stone Age African Howison sport-type tools, which are functionally very similar to Swiss army knives, looked almost the same over vast expanses. This indicates that early humans actively exchanged information and communicated with each other. The tools of the Howison sport industry were produced in huge quantities over 5 millennia and were very perfect for their time. At a later time, there was a degradation of technology, and after some time, a new take-off. The blades made 60,000 years ago were in many respects superior to the stone tools of the late Stone Age, which came only 25,000 years later. Numerous highly versatile blades have been used for many different purposes, including the use as hunting tools, hand-thrown spears, and possibly also a bow and arrow, felling trees and branches, meat, bones, leather dressing, etc. At the same time, all the blades looked very similar and were made according to the uniform pattern throughout the south of the African continent. All this indicates that people of that time must have actively shared the secrets of their manufacture and other information with each other. That is, they were all then socially connected. Boar's jaw on the chest. The Skull Grotto is now in Israel. For centuries, shepherds kept goats in this grotto. Excavations began in 1928, and 3 years later, archaeologists found in the layers of the terrace in front of the grotto the skeletons of 10 ancient people, as well as more than 10,000 stone tools belonging to the Middle Paleolithic. The culture is similar to the Neanderthal. 8 male skeletons, 2 presumably female. All but one of the skeletons had bent legs. Intentional burials are suspected, although grave pits are not traceable. One of the iconic finds is 2 drilled shells, one of the oldest jewelry in the world. On the chest of the skeleton of Skull 5, between the arms, lay the lower jaw of a large boar. Sometimes they mistakenly write that it is clamped in the hand. Skeletons combine progressive archaic features. At various times, they were identified as Neanderthals, or as mestizos of Neanderthals with sapiens, now usually referred to as anatomically modern humans. Skull 5, male, 30-45 years old. The skull is massive, the forehead is sloping, the brow is large, the face is low and very wide. The chin prominence is well defined, but the chin does not protrude. The man was tall, about 179 centimeters, and had equatorial body proportions. The teeth were badly worn, there was an abscess. In addition, this man suffered from rheumatoid arthritis of the mandibular joint. Finds from Skull have been repeatedly dated by different methods. Thus, in 1999, the age of about 119,000 years was obtained by the method of thermoluminescence. The paramagnetic resonance method gave dates of 101,000 years. Family mound in Denmark. The remains of 2 of 3 people discovered in 1875 at the Borum Esche burial mound in Jutland, Denmark, the finds belong to the late Bronze Age. The remains were buried in oak coffins, which allowed them to be dated by annual rings, and are currently stored in the Musgard Museum. The barrow was over 7 meters high and almost 38 meters in diameter. At one time, it was a large monumental building with several internal stone rooms set in stones and a stone fence built in steps. Probably it was used for a long time for religious purposes to commemorate the buried, who were highly respected by their fellow tribesmen. There were several burials in the large barrow, including 3 oak coffins, which were probably originally buried here. In the first burial, the oak is dated to approximately 1351 BC. The remains belong to a woman, 50-60 years old, a man of the same age, and a young man, 20-22 years old. Perhaps they were all relatives. The body of an elderly man is well preserved, even the muscles remained. The study showed that the buried was freshly shaven and even monitored the condition of the nails. The man lay on an ox skin and was covered with woolen blanket. The buried elderly woman was of small stature and heavy build. Analysis of the skeleton showed that she worked very hard. The young man was dressed in a woolen kilt, girded with a leather belt and shod in leather boots. He still has hair, probably cut under the pot. His burial is dated by the rings of the tree from which the coffin was carved to 1345 BC. Volcano with blue flame. A volcanic eruption or molten lava flow is one of the most spectacular sights nature has to offer. But there is nothing more amazing and unusual than the blue flames and strange magma of the Wyken volcano, located on the island of Java. This unusual natural phenomena is explained by the fact that for some reason there is a lot of sulfur in the volcanic gas of Wyken. Even more mysteriously, it is part of a whole complex of volcanoes, but this blue flame, sulfur burns blue, can only be seen in this place. Moreover, this glow can only be seen at night, as it is too weak, although this gas burns at a temperature of 600 degrees Celsius. It turns out that when sulfur comes out of the ground in a gaseous state, it ignites very quickly and forms these incredibly beautiful bluish flames. 1,500-year-old sword. A resident of the village of Pokrovka in the Primorsky territory, Russia, donated it to the Museum Reserve of the History of the Far East, named after a Senium sword whose age exceeds 1,500 years. The man found an ancient weapon during agricultural work. According to an amateur archaeologist, he was plowing a field and spotted a sword. For advice, the man turned to the museum staff. Experts came to the conclusion that the weapons belonged to the era of the Three Kingdoms. This is the period from the 1st to the 7th century AD. Based on the similar objects, the artifact was dated to the 5th-7th centuries. According to the chief curator of the museum, the sword will be handed over for study and later sent for restoration. Most likely, it will replenish the collection in the magic of the blade hole and become available for viewing by museum visitors. Aliens in antiquity. The concept of aliens has been around for a very long time. Long before human civilization developed a scientifically based understanding of the cosmos, people around the world looked up into the sky above and wondered what was there. Some ancient societies inhabited these vast mysterious expanses with gods, being responsible for the creation of the sun, moon, and stars. In the past, people were also often persecuted for thinking differently. This was the case even in ancient Greece, despite the fact that it was famous for its innovative philosophers. When the philosopher Anaxagoras, who was trying to give a scientific explanation for such seemingly supernatural phenomena for those times as eclipses and rainbows, suggested the moon is not a god but a large stone and the sun is also a stone but hot, he was arrested and sentenced to death. Anaxagoras also considered the possibility that the moon might be habitable, which was a highly controversial suggestion, contradicting the dominant view of the cosmos as outlined by Plato and Aristotle. The belief in the existence of other worlds was taken up by many philosophers, including Epicurus, who once wrote to the historian Herodotus that there are an unlimited number of cosmoses, and some of them are like ours, and some are not. This belief, however weak, was preserved in ancient Rome. Nothing in the universe is unique, wrote the Roman poet Lucretius, and therefore in other distant spaces there must be other lands inhabited by various tribes of people and breeds of animals. Although Plato and Aristotle lived in a pre-Christian world, their ideas about the universe helped shape the doctrine of the Christian faith. In the Middle Ages, this belief proclaimed that the earth was created by God as the center of the universe. The story of Jesus Christ, who sacrificed himself to forgive the sins of men, established humanity as the most significant of all creations. If other worlds existed, they could not be inhabited. After all, if they existed, it would automatically reduce the significance of the crucifixion. Dominican monk, mathematician, and cosmological theorist Giordano Bruno did not wait until his death to share ideas about the universe. In 3 dialogues published between 1584 and 1591, Bruno suggested that some distant stars might be suns like ours, that planets also revolve around these suns, and finally, that some of these planets may be inhabited by life similar to the Earth. These views irritated the church, and in addition, Bruno's interest in magic and the occult led to his arrest in 1592. Refusing to renounce heresy, he was burned at the stake after 7 years of imprisonment and torture. Not all participants in the scientific revolution believed in the existence of aliens. Galileo, a devout Catholic, considered the talk of extraterrestrials blasphemous. British polymath William Whewell opposed the theory of many worlds, defending a special relationship between God and humanity. But oddly enough, his religiously motivated thesis, set forth 1853 book called On the Plurality of Worlds, turned out to be more scientifically accurate than the pagan astronomers he criticized. Whewell found an ally in Alfred Russel Wallace, a British naturalist credited with formulating the theory of evolution by natural selection along with Charles Darwin. Our Earth is almost certainly the only habitable planet in our solar system, Wallace wrote in 1903. But even if life exists somewhere in the universe, Wallace was adamant that it could never reach the level of sophistication we find on Earth. Despite the fact that life outside the Earth may well exist, there has never been any evidence of this. Our telescopes do not allow a good look at potentially habitable planets, and radio observation of space does not give anything. The aliens also seem to be in no hurry to contact us. This situation is known as the Fermi paradox. It can be formulated as follows: alien civilizations must exist, but why haven't they made contact yet? Cyprus, which is more than 5,000 years old. The old guy has been hiding in the forests of South America for thousands of years, and among the people, he is called great-grandfather. On our planet, there are 2 types of oldies: trees that represent clonal colonies and lone trees. The first ones are clones of the same tree. That is, the tree itself can be relatively young and sometimes even like a grove, but its root system is very old. For example, this is exactly what the Pando forest is. According to estimates, this forest is about 80,000 years old, and maybe many times more, although outwardly, the forest looks like a completely young poplar grove. It is more difficult with a single tree. It grows continuously for centuries and sometimes for millennia. Its trunk is the same age as the root system. It is from this category that the Fitzroy, which was nicknamed great-grandfather, grows in the forest in Chile. The great-grandfather, according to preliminary estimates, is 5,484 years old, which means that the tree is older than the previous record holder by about 600 years. That great-grandfather overtook is called Methuselah, and he grows up in the California National Park. Fitzroys are one of the largest trees in the world and belong to the same cypress family as redwoods. Fitzroys grow in Argentina and Chile, but in a very limited area. They are considered one of the oldest trees on the planet. They grow very slowly, but at the same time, they live for a long time. There are many specimens whose age has exceeded a couple of millennia, but great-grandfather managed to break even the records of his fellows. Apparently, he is much older than all the trees on the planet. It's hard to imagine, but this tree began to grow several centuries before real writing appeared. According to research, it appeared among the Sumerians around 2750 BC. Determining the age of such trees is quite difficult. It is necessary to conduct a number of studies. Wyken shipyard in Burka. Swedish archaeologists during excavations on the small island of Björkö, where the city of Birka, a large early medieval trading center, was located, discovered a Wyken-era shipyard, the first find of its kind. In addition to the structure itself, the scientists had at their disposal tools for working wood, grindstones, and numerous rivets. Traditionally, the period from the end of the 8th to the middle of the 11th century in European history is referred to as the Viking Age. This is the time when the Scandinavians carried out military and commercial expansion, mastered the remote northern lands of Iceland, Greenland, the Faroe Islands, and even reached Canada. One of the most famous monuments of this era is located on the small Swedish island of Björk, located about 40 kilometers from Stockholm. There are the remains of an early medieval city with a harbor, a wharf, and several necropolises. Archaeological work in Birka, which is still ongoing, has made it possible to discover a huge number of finds. Only burials, many of which belong to noble people, scientists have identified about 3,000, some of which were subsequently excavated. So, archaeologists at the end of the 19th century found a Viking burial there, which a few years ago geneticists called a female warrior, but this conclusion was soon disputed. Excavations revealed the remains of fortifications, numerous buildings, including the estate of the builder of the first Christian church in Sweden, a large number of household items, handicrafts, and jewelry. This is the first building of its kind discovered, but the finds convincingly demonstrate that this was the shipyard where people serviced their ships. Through systematic research, mapping, and drone surveys, archaeologists have established that Birka was not only an important urban center, but also had great potential in the field of maritime navigation, which allowed for intensive trade. 2 ancient Roman temples in the Netherlands. The temple complex was found at a clay mining site in the village of Hoven-Hameling, located in the eastern province of Gelderland near the German border. In ancient times, the border of the Roman state passed in this area, and therefore, scientists were especially surprised by this find. Nearby is Limes, a fortified borderline of the state. Research teams have discovered the remains of at least 2 Roman-era temples that were in use between the 1st and 4th centuries. One of them was of the Gallo-Roman type, had a tiled roof and richly painted walls. A slightly smaller temple stood a few meters away. Among the artifacts found in the ruins were the remains of statues of deities, as well as pits where Roman soldiers lit sacrificial fires. Among the finds were also painted fragments of plaster and tiles with inscriptions. Based on the types of inscriptions on the tiles, archaeologists believe that the temple complex was used by soldiers, since it was the military who made the tiles. In addition, several dozen small stone altars were found, where Roman soldiers brought offerings to the gods. Temple complex in France. Archaeologists have found a large temple complex from the time of Roman Gaul in northwestern France. Previously, in the territories that were once called Gaul, archaeologists have discovered many ancient sacred sites, but the new find seems very important even against this background. Not only is the sanctuary itself quite well preserved, but the surrounding buildings can still be seen. All this together gives an idea of the daily life of both the servants of the temple complex and visitors. The name comes from the Roman name of the Celtic tribes, the Gauls, who fought for their freedom with Rome for a long time. Gaul was called the lands that are part of such modern countries as France, Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. Excavations were carried out on an area of more than 7 hectares. The cult complex consists of a large sanctuary bounded on both sides by a 60-meter gallery with columns. 2 temples, a larger one and a smaller one, are typical Romano-Celtic phenoms. This is the name of the temple of square masonry, in the center of which a whole sanctuary was built, enclosed by an internal square gallery. The figure of the deity to whom the temple is dedicated was placed in the hall. The faithful read their prayers and made offerings in the gallery. A complex of two phenomens at once is a rare find. Archaeologists suggest that the large temple was dedicated to the main deity or deities of the sanctuary, the small one to deities of secondary importance. The temples were built in the 1st century BC, immediately after the Roman conquest of Gaul, and they functioned, according to experts, for at least 5 centuries until the 4th century AD. On the territory of the complex, archaeologists discovered a small bronze figurine of the god Mars. It can be assumed that at least one of the temples was dedicated to him. Interestingly, in Roman Gaul, Mars was not so much a bloodthirsty god of war as a benevolent figure, a protector, a healing deity. In addition to the 2 temples, experts unearthed residential buildings and baths with an area of 120 square meters. Baths are an indispensable element of the Roman lifestyle. Judging by their size, they were intended for public use, including visitors to the sanctuary. Wooden figurine of Chimp culture. Archaeologists, during excavations at the site of Wyken, which is attributed to the Chimp culture, discovered a perfectly preserved wooden figurine. This artifact, measuring 47 by 16 centimeters, depicts an anthropomorphic character with a face painted red. According to scientists, the discovered product emphasizes the ritual function of the object where it was found. In the 9th–15th centuries AD, the Chimp culture flourished on the northern coast of Peru. It was formed in the valley of the Moche River on the basis of the Mochica culture. Late Chimp monuments are identified with the taste of Chimor, founded by Tacanamo at the beginning of the 13th century and conquered by the Incas around 1470. The figure has a flat, oval-shaped face painted red, as well as a protruding nose. Inside the almond-shaped eyes, as well as the ears, the researchers found the remains of black resin, which may have been used to attach mother-of-pearl plates. On the head of this figure is a trapezoidal headdress, decorated with 7 alternating light and dark vertical stripes. The left arm of the anthropomorphic character is bent at the elbow and pressed to the body, while the right arm is extended along it. On the figure's belt is a loincloth, or some analog of a triangular skirt. It seems that originally the torso and arms were also painted red. According to researchers, the discovered figurine confirms the ritual function of the structure where it was found. One of the oldest mosques in the world. Israeli archaeologists have discovered a rare ancient mosque in the country's south that experts say sheds light on the region's transition from Christianity to Islam. The remains of the mosque, believed to be over 1,200 years old, were discovered during construction work on a new quarter in the Bedouin town of Rahat. The mosque, located in the Negev desert, consists of a square room and a wall facing Mecca, with a semicircular niche in that wall pointing south. These unique architectural features show that the building was used as a mosque. Not far from the mosque, a luxurious estate was also found with the remains of dishes and glass artifacts, indicating the wealth of its inhabitants. 3 years ago, authorities excavated nearby another mosque from the same era, dating from the 7th to 8th centuries AD, calling the 2 Islamic temples among the earliest known in the entire world. Mosques, estates, and other houses found nearby illuminate the historical process that took place in the northern Negev with the emergence of a new religion, the religion of Islam, as well as a new rule and culture in the region. Gems in the teeth. The ancient Maya were once very proud of their teeth. Long before Europeans started filling their mouth with gold and inserting grills, the Maya blazed with teeth adorned with jade, turquoise, gold, pyrite, and precious stones. The Maya believed that their breath connected them to the gods. To clean it, many people filed, carved, and polished their teeth. Some even decorated them with precious stones. And a new study shows that the glue used to hold the jewelry to the teeth may have prevented infections. During the classical period, 200 to 900 AD, many Mayan people in what is now Guatemala, Belize, and Mexico attached colored stones to the front of their teeth. Mayan dentists drilled holes in the enamel and denting, then fitted the stones and applied glue. Usually this happened as part of the rite of initiation, transition to adulthood. The denture adhesive has proven to be surprisingly durable. More than half of the modified teeth from archaeological sites still have their decorations intact. Previous research into the adhesive has identified cement-like inorganic materials and hydroxyapatite, a mineral derived from crushed teeth and bones used to strengthen the mixture. Now researchers have found 150 organic molecules common in plant resins, which they reported last month in the Journal of Archaeological Science reports. Most of the samples included ingredients that can fight bacteria that cause cavities. Oral hygiene was important to the Maya. Archaeologists point to Genab Pakal, a Mayan king of Palenque who died in 683 AD at the age of 80 with almost all teeth and no signs of caries. Two mysterious holes. Known scientifically as SK54, this skull has given a team of paleontologists at the University of Johannesburg numerous headaches due to mysterious holes that are visible on its surface. This skull belongs to a young Paranthropus solidus, Australopithecus solidus, which lived on the lands of South Africa a little over 1.5 million years ago. The first clue to the puzzle came from other remains found in the same Stockfontein cave. The hominids that the researchers believe they belonged to were killed elsewhere, after which the attacker took them to his lair. The second clue was the diameter of the holes and the distance between them. Paleozoologists helped in the study. They found the alleged culprit, the panther Pardus beguini, the ancestor of our leopard. This they confirmed using various fossilized skulls of these animals and even analyzing the trajectories and pressure points of current leopard bites. Books written in gold and on gold. An amazing exhibition dedicated to books covered with gold, written on gold or in gold, has opened at the British Library. A project called Gold has collected codices, scrolls, and documents from the library's collection, a total of 50 items originating from 20 countries in 17 languages related to the 5 major world religions. It shows how this precious metal has captured the imagination of scribes, artists, and clients throughout the history, across cultures and religions. Items on display include a treaty from southern India inscribed on a gold strip more than 2 meters long, 1691. Buddhist chants inscribed on 2 gold strips from Myanmar, Burma, dating back to the 5th-6th centuries, one of the oldest exhibits in the exhibition. A Byzantine imperial seal, a 13th century Quran frame with the earliest known example of gold embossing on leather, the Buddhist Lotus Sutra inscribed on a scroll in gold and silver ink, the Gold Harley Gospels, written entirely in gold ink in the 9th century, a Tudor half-book, and other and so on. Excavations in the sunken ancient city. In the ancient sunken city of the Mitanni Empire in Iraq, large buildings and artifacts were found. A group of German and Kurdish archaeologists have excavated a 3,400-year-old ancient city of the Mitanni era, located in the Tigris River basin. The ruins of the settlement appeared in the Mosul Reservoir in early 2022, when the water level dropped due to a severe drought in Iraq. In a short time, until the ruins and artifacts artifacts again disappeared underwater, the researchers managed to map the city. In addition to the palace, which was already documented in 2018, archaeologists found several other large buildings, a massive fortification with a wall and towers, a multi-story warehouse building, and an industrial complex. The remains of the city date back to the Mitanni Empire, which controlled much of northern Mesopotamia and Syria. It is noted that the walls of the city are well preserved, despite the fact that they are made of mud brick and were underwater. In addition, the upper part of the walls collapsed during an earthquake around 1350 BC and buried the rest of the building under it, creating conditions that ensured its preservation. Of particular interest to scientists are 5 ceramic vessels containing an archive of more than 100 cuneiform tablets. They belong to the Middle Assyrian period, shortly after the earthquake hit the city. Some tablets, which may be the ancient letters, are still found inside clay envelopes. The researchers hope that this discovery will provide important information about the last years of the city's existence and the beginning of Assyrian rule in the region. Australopithecus from the cradle of humankind. Archaeologists have clarified the age of Australopithecus, the fossilized remains of which were found at the Sterkfontein site. Cosmogenic dating has showed that South African individuals lived 3.7 million years ago, and not 2.6 million years ago as previously thought. The revised age makes the South African hominins contemporaneous with the Alpha and some other Middle Pliocene Australopithecines. On the territory of the Republic of South Africa, not far from Johannesburg, there is a complex of monuments called the Cradle of Humankind, which is included in the list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. On an area of about 474 square kilometers, there are many limestone caves that are rich in fossil remains. Fossilized remains were found in this place, in particular African Australopithecus, Australopithecus sediba, Paranthropus, Handyman, Iceman, and some other hominine species. The excavations yielded a huge collection of finds. By the end of the 20th century, more than 300 fossils were known that belonged to African and massive Australopithecus, early Homo. The most famous among these finds is the STS-5 Australopithecus skull, found back in 1947 and known as Mrs. Ples. Unlike most East African sites of such antiquity, it is difficult to date the finds from Sterkfontein because it does not contain volcanic deposits that can be dated with reliable physical methods. After conducting a huge number of analyses, archaeologists concluded that all the fossilized remains of Australopithecus found in Sterkfontein date back to about 3.4 million years ago. In South Africa, the Australopithecus of Sterkfontein lived about 1 million years before Paranthropus, early Homo, and Sediba Australopithecus. Network of 3,000-year-old tunnels. Thousands of years ago, in the Andes on the territory of today's Peru, there was an ancient Chavin people who left behind a temple complex in Chavin de Huanta, under which a huge network of tunnels and galleries was discovered not so long ago. Archaeologists from Stanford University are sure that the hidden rooms were used for religious rituals. As the lead author of the new study, John Rick, noted, some of the dark, isolated rooms could be used for something like sensory deprivation. The larger galleries, however, were clearly places for religious ceremonies. Archaeologists have clarified that the hidden rooms in question cannot be considered tunnels in the literal sense because they are not dug into the ground but are built inside a large temple complex which was built in several stages between 1200 BC and 200 AD. The passages remained hidden from outsiders for 3,000 years. It took scientists 15 years of excavation to discover 36 galleries connected by tunnels. The study of this archaeological site continues, so new significant discoveries are ahead of the researchers. The most large-scale find of mummies. On the southern outskirts of the ancient city of Memphis, there is the Saqqara Necropolis, a huge burial and memorial complex the size of which is approximately 7 by 1.5 kilometers. This is the largest collection of tombs and mortuary monuments in Egypt, created at different times, from the early dynastic period to the era of Ptolemaic rule and Roman domination. The name of this necropolis comes from the name of the god of death, Soka, who was revered here. Scientists from the Egyptian Archaeological Mission, who are working in the necropolis of sacred animals in Saqqara, discovered a large cache of antiquities at this site. Inside it, archaeologists discovered 150 bronze statues of various sizes that depicted ancient Egyptian deities, including Anubis, Minamun, Isis, Nefertum, Basta, and Hathor. In addition, the finds included a collection of bronze artifacts that were used during rituals dedicated to the goddess Isis, as well as a headless bronze statue of the architect Imhotep. Archaeologists have also discovered shaft tombs containing 250 painted wooden sarcophaguses containing well-preserved late-period mummies. In addition, scientists had at their disposal a collection of amulets and wooden statues. Inside one of the sarcophaguses, the researchers found a well-preserved papyrus, which may contain chapters from the Book of the Dead. This find is currently handed over for restoration and study of the text contained in it. The archaeologists also found 2 well-preserved wooden statues with gilded faces that depicted the goddess Isis and Nephthys in the pose of mourners. The excavations revealed a burial from the New Kingdom, which contained many household items and jewelry, including bracelets, earrings, and necklaces. Stone forest in Bulgaria. There is a very special place in Bulgaria. Not far from Varna, there is a stone forest, which are buildings, but their origin has not yet been established. This is one of the most popular places in this small country, which attracts the attention of not only tourists, but also scientists. This place looks like several stone sculptures that are filled with sand. If you look closely, you can see the outlines of people's faces and the silhouettes of animals, as well as some symbols such as a heart. When this forest appeared here, no one knows. Scientists have not yet been able to find an answer to this question. For the first time, this forest is mentioned in a source from the beginning of the 19th century. Earlier references have not yet been found. There is a special place in the stone forest that looks like a circle. Many scientists believe that various religious rituals were held here, but this information has not yet been confirmed or denied. Although familiar shapes can be seen in the stones, scientists still say that the stone blocks are not the work of human hands. People tend to look for different symbols, which is why they see silhouettes. There are a lot of versions about how the stone forest appeared. Someone suggests that this is the work of aliens. Someone is inclined to believe that it was built specifically for rituals. And some of the scientists suggest that there used to be a sea in this place, and therefore such stone blocks were formed. Travelers who came to the stone forest claim that in this place, the equipment stops working, and the person himself replenishes his energy and feels himself filled with spiritual strength. Many people come here to perform some rituals. According to local belief, to find love, you need to touch a heart-shaped stone, and if a couple wants children, you need to touch a statue in the shape of a stork. There is also a stone with a hole, which according to legend, will help to cleanse oneself of sins. To do this, you need to go through it. Ancient zigzag object. Chinese archaeologists have studied the historical monument of Wyken and found traces of ritual sacrifices from the early stage of the Xia dynasty. According to CGTN, an unusual ceremonial structure stands out among the finds. Wyken is a famous ancient site in Yuzhou, in the central Chinese province of Henan. There is a large sacred complex here, which is believed to have been erected around 2 millennia BC. Then, about 4,000 years ago, the Xia dynasty ruled in China, the capital of which was the city of Wyken. Archaeologists have discovered an unusual ancient structure, a zigzag object that is 31 meters long and 26 meters wide. The area of the the strange structure is approximately 800 square meters. At the base of the unique object, traces of rich sacrifices were found, for example, the skeletons of various animals, as well as shells of mollusks. It is assumed that these are the remains of grandiose feasts that were held here as an element of ritual ceremonies. Scientists hope to make new discoveries at the Wyken site, which will help to understand the history of this place. Finds with traces of teeth of medieval shoemakers. In modern Ryazan in Russia, during excavations, many pieces of shoe leather with bites were found, which are several centuries old. One of the notable finds is the top of a boot, which was used as a gag. Here, on the southeastern section of the Kremlin, in the 15th-16th centuries, there was a shoemaker's shop. When processing the finds, experts noticed that many fragments of the skin retain traces of human teeth. These imprints are most clearly seen immediately after the removal of the skin from the wet cultural layer, and later, upon drying, the traces disappeared. But if the skin was moistened, then they show through again. These traces were found on a variety of leather fragments, on cut pieces, on shoe parts, on household items, and even on the so-called planta thick leather. They were different, clear and weak, located in a single semicircular group or several groups, and sometimes overlapped and even merged with each other. Archaeologists examined the prints under a microscope at optical magnification up to 40 times. By the nature of the prints, it became clear that the artisans left them when working with the skin. With the help of their own teeth, they held the blanks, scraped, stretched, and even chewed the skin to soften it a little. Found traces of teeth of people of different ages. The teeth of the inhabitants of the medieval Peryaslav-Ryazanski were relatively even. Malocclusion was found on 4 prints out of 16 studied in detail. One notable find is the shaft of a leather boot, which, judging by the teeth marks, was used as a gag. Archaeologists have unearthed a 2,100-year-old manor. A team of Israeli archaeologists have unearthed the 2,100-year-old ruins of an agricultural farm at Horbad Asad, east of the Sea of Galilee. There were found dozens of looms used to make cloth, large ceramic vessels for food storage, and iron agricultural implements, including various pikes and scythe. Found ancient coins made it possible to date this estate to the second half of the 2nd century BC. It is the Hellenistic period of the Hasmoneans. We were lucky to find a frozen time capsule where everything remained as it was left by the ancient inhabitants, who seemed to pack up and leave in great haste in the face of some impending danger, perhaps the threat of a military attack. We know from historical sources that during this period of Hasmonean kingdom of Judah expanded into Galilee. It is possible that this farmstead was abandoned just as a result of those events. However, more research is needed to establish the identity of the inhabitants of this place. The group also discovered the foundations of buildings, ceramic vessels, and other things dating back to earlier times, to the 10th-9th centuries BC. This interesting and significant discovery was made during excavations carried out on the eve of the construction of an aqueduct stretching from the Mediterranean coast. Before continuing the work, it is planned to carefully conserve the estate as well as everything that is in the immediate vicinity of it. Burials of the mythical Aztecs. Archaeologists from the National Institute of Anthropology and History of Mexico have discovered previously unknown to science burials of the mythical Aztec culture, which according to scientists existed more than 1,000 years ago in Mesoamerica. The graves were accidentally discovered by workers during construction work in the Mexican port of Sinaloa in Mazatlan. The work was temporarily suspended, after which archaeologists carried out rescue excavations. As a result, they unearthed burials from the pre-Hispanic period. These turned out to be rather simple tombs that were built on a natural mound. The idea justified itself. For a millennium, the ancient mounds reliably protected the burial places from erosion and destruction. The surface of the mound was covered with fragments of shells which were rammed into the ground. It was probably part of the funeral ritual. Here, the researchers found the remains of wooden buildings, which may also have been erected for ritual purposes. The bodies of the dead were found under the floor of these buildings. Experts have concluded that the burials may belong to the mysterious culture of Aztlan. It has hardly been studied since so far too little evidence of its existence has been found. However, according to the legends of other people, it is known that Aztlan was an extensive cultural and trade network covering a significant territory. According to one version, this civilization could be associated with the mythical Aztlan, a place that is considered the ancestral home of the Aztecs. Moreover, in translation from the Nahuatl language, the word Azteca itself means people from Aztlan. Aztlan is mentioned in several ethno-historical sources relating to the colonial period, but scientists have not yet found a direct connection with the culture of Aztlan. According to archaeologist Alfonso Grave Toretto, the burials found date back to around 900 AD. At that time, the peak of social, economic, and political development of local states was observed in this region. Mummy of a paralyzed after a stroke woman. Scientists using an X-ray machine examined an ancient Egyptian mummy buried with a crutch and found that it belonged to a woman who died at the age of 25-40. Her skeletal pathologies indicated that she had suffered a stroke that resulted in paralysis on the left side of her body. According to the researchers, the red shroud of this 2,700-year-old mummy emphasizes the woman's high social status. The development of paleoradiology, that is, the study of bioarchaeological materials using modern imaging methods, radiography, computed tomography, and magnetic resonance imaging, three-dimensional reconstruction, and some other technologies introduced into medical practice at the end of the 20th century, allowed scientists to make significant progress in the study of mummified remains. In recent years, a large number of studies of Egyptian mummies have appeared using paleoradiological methods. This allowed us to take a fresh look at the evolution of a wide range of infectious and vascular diseases, as well as tumors. For example, a recent study showed that 29 out of 76 ancient Egyptians studied suffered from atherosclerosis. In addition, paleopathologists have found evidence of widespread tuberculosis in ancient Egypt, including among children, as well as malaria. Scientists noted that the mummy attracted attention with its red linen shroud, which covered her head and body. The remains belonged to a woman who died at the age of 25-40. The researchers drew attention to the fact that her right arm was extended along the body, while the left was bent and pressed to her chest, and the hand was twisted. In addition, the woman's head was facing down, and the position of the left fibula indicated that the foot was turned inward. The bones of the feet themselves are missing. The woman suffered from damage to the right hemisphere of the brain. Apparently, after the age of 23-25, she suffered a stroke, which led to paralysis of the left side of her body. However, she lived with this for a long period. This is indicated by the difference in the thickness of the cortical bone. According to scientists, this is the oldest recorded case of stroke described in the paleopathological literature. The first XXL mammals. Being an innovator is a big risk and a big reward. The first amphibian that crawled onto land gave its descendants carte blanche to colonize land and air, and the first dinosaur set evolutionary trends for hundreds of millions of years to come. But hundreds, if not thousands, of species have died out, unable to cope with the competition. Among them were titanoids, the first XXL-sized mammals. Today, North Dakota is covered with grasslands, deciduous and coniferous forests, but 60 million years ago, it was a swampy subtropical paradise. Soft, lush vegetation grew everywhere, and the genus Titanoids decided to take advantage of the natural wealth. The giants quite strongly resembled modern bears: a stocky body on short legs, a powerful short neck, a small tail, and a weight of 90 to 130 kilos. But they were not related to modern bears. Titanoids were much slower, couldn't stand up on their hind legs, and the shape of the muzzle was also different. A skeleton of a titanoid, left, and a brown bear, right? Notice the difference in the size of the cranium. Our hero clearly did not shine with intellect, and the animals also acquired long, strong fangs, which is rather strange because they ate only fruits and soft vegetation. In extreme cases, they did not disdain carrion, but they certainly did not hunt on their own. This slow carcass is simply unable to catch anyone. For protection, the teeth were not suitable as well. Other mammals did not pose a danger purely physically, and neither strong claws nor fangs saved from crocodiles. Titanoids were the first to break into a large size class among mammals, but the species that followed were faster, more agile, and better adapted to environmental changes. A similar fate awaited the entire family of pantodonts, which our heroes were part of. Some of them reached the size of rhinos, but already 30 million years ago there was no trace of the family. Unique find in Egypt. While excavating the ancient city of Aswan, archaeologists found pieces of a sarcophagus lid that were adorned with a colorful leopard face. Just now, scientists have published a digital reconstruction of a piece of art found in a necropolis containing 300 tombs that date back to the 7th century BC. In ancient Egyptian society, leopards symbolized determination and strength, so the design of the animal in the tomb was probably supposed to strengthen the spirit of the recently deceased and help in travel to the land of the dead. The necropolis, which housed the leopard sarcophagus, was in use for approximately 1,000 years until the 4th century AD and was excavated by an international team of experts from the Egyptian-Italian mission in West Aswan. Other tombs contained a total of 35 mummies and a range of funerary items such as pots of bitumen for mummification, funerary masks, linens, papyrus, and food for the journey to the afterlife. Another interesting find was kept near the tomb, a bowl with plant material which turned out to be pine nuts. Although the nuts were not native to the region, they are known to have been used by cooks in Alexandria, according to a Roman cookbook called Apicius, which was compiled as far back as the 1st century AD. One of the recipes described soft-boiled eggs in a sauce made from pine nuts, ground pepper, honey, and anchovy paste. We imagine that the people buried in the tomb of Aswan really liked this rare seed, so much so that their relatives placed a bowl next to the deceased so that they could eat it for all eternity. Remains of white and red wine. Chemists and paleobotanists conducted a study of the contents of 3 Roman amphoras found on the seabed of the coast of Lazio. Inside these vessels, they found the remains of resin extracted from pine trees, pollen, and plant tissues, including the remains of grapes. Analysis showed that wine was stored in amphorae, 2 of which were white and 1 was red. In the era of antiquity, the leading role in the Mediterranean trade was played by the transport of grain, olive oil, and wine. For the storage and transportation of these goods, amphoras were used, usually clay vessels with an expanded upper and narrower lower part of the body, a narrow neck, and 2 handles. The manufacture of amphorae was of mass nature, and each production center followed a certain standard of shape and volume. By the shape and size, one can usually judge what kind of product the amphora was intended for. For example, pot-bellied for olive oil and narrower and taller for wine. The inner surface of the latter was sometimes covered with resin. Resin, like clay with lime, was also used to seal the throat. A group of scientists from Italy and France, led by Donatella Magri from the University of La Sapienza in Rome, examined 3 ancient Roman amphoras found in 2018 on the seabed near the modern harbor of the Italian commune of San Felice Sersio. From the bottom and inner walls of all 3 amphoras, scientists took samples of organic materials for chemical research using gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, as well as paleobotanical analysis. As a result of the analysis, chemists found out that inside the amphoras there was a resin obtained from pine trees. All samples also contained tartaric, malic, and pyruvic acids, and 1 amphora also contained syringic acid. In addition, in the resin, scientists also found acid esters obtained from acids and alcohol. Chemical analysis indicated that the SFC1 amphora contained red wine, while the SFC2 and SFC5 contained white wine. Dead turtle with egg in Pompeii. The general public is used to the fact that if archaeologists find the remains of living creatures during excavations in Pompeii, then they are usually associated with the catastrophic eruption of Vesuvius in 79. It was then that Pompeii itself and other small cities in the vicinity of the volcano perished, and the surviving people moved to the big cities of Campania, for example Naples and Capua. However, the new find refers to a different period of the city's existence, the years between two natural disasters. In 62, an earthquake occurred in the Italian Campania. It was quite serious, although tremors for Campania are not such a rare occurrence. After this earthquake, Pompeii found itself in a rather difficult situation. Both private houses and public buildings were damaged. Moreover, some were so destroyed that they had to be dismantled, freeing the land for new construction. Excavations were carried out in a shop almost next to the main entrance to the bath. This site was also badly damaged during the earthquake and for some time stood abandoned. It was during this period that the turtle, planning to lay an egg, found refuge in it. However, for some reason, this shelter did not suit her. And I must say that reptiles, including turtles, are able to delay the laying of eggs. This reaction of the reptile's body to stress, the lack of a comfortable nest or danger, is called dystocia. Experts at the Pompeii Archaeological Park believe that it was dystocia that prevented the turtle from successfully laying an egg, and she died with it inside. By the way, this turtle is not the only turtle found in Pompeii, but usually their remains were found in gardens or rich houses where they could live like pets, and they didn't have any eggs. One of the largest golden treasures in history. One of the largest, richest, and most beautiful gold treasures in Danish history has been found near the town of Jelling in Denmark. The treasure dates back to the 6th century. An amazing discovery was made by an amateur archaeologist who had recently bought a metal detector and wandered around the fields with it. Moreover, the treasure was found more than 6 months ago, in December last year, but the discovery was made public only now. The hoard weighs a little less than a kilogram and consists of saucer-sized medallions and Roman coins that have been turned into jewelry. The most important is a heavy gold coin of the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, 285-337. Some of the items have runic designs and inscriptions that can refer to the kings of that time, as well as to Scandinavian mythology. One of the finds is a bracteate flat-tin coin with a series of runes and a braided male head. There is also an image of a horse and a bird. In addition, there is a runic inscription on the coin, which according to early interpretations translates as supreme. Supreme can refer both to the ruler and as especially characteristic of later mythological contexts to be associated with the god Odin. Scientists note that although there was a small city in the area during the migration period, there is no evidence that long before the rise of the Danish kingdom, there lived an unprecedented military leader or a great man who was the owner of these treasures. As experts explained, in the early 500s, some very rich but unknown person decided to bury his treasury, perhaps in the hope of saving it in case of war or as a sacrifice to higher powers. The second version is supported by the fact that at this time, the climate in Northern Europe turned upside down after a volcanic explosion in Iceland in 536, and it was for this purpose that most of the treasures of that period were buried. Gem Minaret. The Gem Minaret, located in the northwestern part of Afghanistan, was erected at the turn of the 12th and 13th centuries. But its perfect construction, stunning decor, and the skill of medieval Afghan builders are still amazed everyone who has seen this architectural masterpiece made of baked bricks. The height of the minaret is about 60 meters, according to one of the inscriptions on its walls. The building was built in 1194 in honor of the victory of Sultan Ghiyas ad-Din over the army of the ruler of the Ghaznavid dynasty. But many experts question this information. According to one version, the minaret is all that remains of the city Australopithecus, which means turquoise mountain, which during the heyday of the Guardian dynasty was the capital of the empire that covered the territories of modern Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India. At the beginning of the 13th century, the armed forces of the Mongol Empire, under the command of the notorious Genghis Khan, raised the city off the face of the earth, but they somehow overlooked the tall minaret. Thanks to this inattention of the Mongols, as well as the fact that after the invasion of Genghis Khan, no one remembered the construction for almost 700 years, the architectural monument has been perfectly preserved, but at present, it is not possible to carry out comprehensive studies of the building due to the unstable socio-political situation in Afghanistan. How to find out the truth after 2000 years. In the 1980s, on the ancient beach of the ancient Roman city, the remains of 300 townspeople were found in structures that archaeologists conditionally called boathouses, storage rooms for boats. In 79, they fled there from the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. About 24 people then died on the very shore. Moreover, the majority of those killed inside the boathouses were women and children, and those who remained by the water were men. Among the latter, the attention of scientists was attracted by the skeleton of a military man. On it were found a rich belt with a sword and dagger, a bag with carpentry tools, and a considerable, for a soldier, amount of money. Anthropologists reported that at the time of his death, he was 45 years old. He was healthy and physically strong. Archaeologists suggested that it was a legionnaire who, along with several men, was waiting on the shore for a boat to rescue people who were sitting in the boathouses. The skeleton was given a conventional popular name, Soldier of Herculaneum. During the quarantine, the staff of the archaeological park had time to turn to the archives and revise the finds from past years. This is how the Soldier of Herculaneum had a new interpretation. First, they paid special attention to his personal belongings. The sword had an ivory hilt, a belt trimmed with gold and silver, and next to the soldier lay 2 gold and 12 silver coins. Secondly, a bag with tools is not put into a regular legionnaire. It was assumed that this is a Praetorian, but experts have no information about the deployment of the Praetorian Guard somewhere on the Naples coast. The revision of the known data from a different angle of view suggested to archaeologists a new hypothesis. Obviously, the man was not a simple legionnaire, and if you remember that the fleet was not too far from Herculaneum in Misenum, then it is more likely that he was a sailor, not a soldier. But an ordinary sailor doesn't need a bag with carpentry or carpentry tools, and he could hardly have that much money. So according to experts, he could be a naval engineer of the Mizensky fleet who worked with wood. Such an engineer was called Faber Navalis. Burial of the Bronze Age on a golf course. British archaeologists have discovered a coffin containing human remains and a stone axe with a wooden handle in a pond on a golf course in the east of England. Scientists have established that the rare find, which has survived thanks to silt, is about 4,000 years old. Apparently, the burial belonged to a person who held a high position in the local society. The early Bronze Age of Britain is usually dated from 2500 to 1200 BC. Over the millennium, bronze gradually replaced stone as a main material from which weapons and tools were made. During this period, the tradition of bell-shaped beakers turned out to be the main archaeological culture widespread in Britain. Burials of this era are inhumations. As a rule, people were buried one by one in graves under mounds. Bell-shaped goblets were often used as burial items, which is most likely associated with the arrival of migrants from Central Europe to Britain. Archaeologists told about the discovery of a rare coffin of the early Bronze Age, hollowed out of an oak trunk which had previously been split in 2 halves. It contained the remains of a man whose grave goods consisted of an axe. The lid of the coffin has not survived. Scientists suggest that the burial was made around 2000 BC. The coffin turned out to be about 3 meters long and 1 meter wide. Inside, it was lined with plants, in particular, yew and juniper leaves. After he was placed in the grave, a gravel mound was poured over it, which was mainly due to people with high status in society. This find was made by accident while working in a pond at a golf course which is located in Lincolnshire. The world's oldest tattoo needles. People have been tattooing their bodies for thousands of years, but recently, archaeologists have found that ancient people began to make tattoos much earlier than previously thought. Tennessee archaeologists have discovered the oldest tattoo toolkit in the world, ranging in age from 5,520 to 3,620 years. Researchers found the tattoo kit in 1985 during the construction of a bridge near Nashville, Tennessee. At the time, scientists defined it simply as a toolbox. It has been in storage for several decades. This was one of those situations where an artifact ends up in a collection, but nothing is done with it. The Wolf took an interest in the toolbox because he mistook it for an Indian drug set. But after he teamed up with zooarchaeologist Tanya Perez of Florida State University, scientists realized that they had something else in their hands: ancient tattoo needles. The set contained turkey bone needles, pigment-filled shell hafts, and stone tools. The signs of wear, discovered by another archaeologist, Christian Gates St. Pierre, helped to understand the true purpose of the needles. He and Perez also found traces of red and black pigment on the tips of the bones. They believe that the bones were used as needles for tattoos and the dyed shells were used as ink pots. Based on radiocarbon dating, the Wolf and Perez also determined their age. This suggests that ancient people in North America used tattoos more than 1,000 years earlier than previously thought. Because tattoos leave marks and human skin degrades over time, it is difficult for scientists to understand the scope and significance of tattoos in ancient cultures. Emerald Tablet. Unlike other archaeological finds, the Emerald Tablet has not survived to our time, so scientists do not know who was the author of the original of this document, what it was intended for, and what fate befell the monument of medieval Oriental art. The only thing that is known for certain about the Emerald Tablet is that it was first mentioned in an Arabic book dated to the 6th or 8th century AD. In some early copies of the tablet made by Arabic translators, there is information that the original was written in the ancient Syrian language, but experts have no evidence of this yet. The earliest of the Latin translations of the tablet dates back to the 12th century. Later, several more versions of the text were created. The authorship of one of them belongs to the famous scientist Sir Isaac Newton. According to some scientists, the Emerald Tablet describes the technology of converting various metals into gold using a mythical substance known as the Philosopher's Stone. But so far, no one has been able to carry out this alchemical experiment. Probably the Latin and Arabic translators of the original instructions are not too accurate. Discovered the real relics of St. Peter. A sensational find was made by a worker in the Roman church of Santa Maria in Capella. During the restoration work under a stone slab at the altar, he discovered two ancient clay jugs with the name of the first popes, Peter, Felix, Callistus, and Cornelius. And as you know, the Apostle Peter was the first Roman bishop, that is, the first pope of Rome. For the past 35 years, this church has been closed due to its dilapidated state. Finally, in 2021, restoration work began in it. When one of the workers lifted a stone slab next to the ancient altar, he saw a cache. It contained dilapidated clay jugs, on the lids of which the names of the first popes were written. The fact that the remains of the first saints are kept in the Church of Santa Maria in Capella has been known for a long time. However, who exactly was not known. Also, the sources say that it is here that the tunic of the Mother of God is kept, but so far it is considered a lost relic. The found remains were transferred to Vatican, but there was no official statement that these were the relics of St. Peter. The rector of the church, Father Massimiliano Floridi, believes that until an examination is made, it is not worth saying that these are definitely the relics of St. Peter. But the most interesting thing is that in the 1960s, under the Basilica of St. Peter on the Vatican Hill, a tombstone was found with an inscription in Greek, Patros Ani, Peter is here. In the tomb was found the body of a man about 60 years old who lived according to research in the 1st century AD. He was dressed in rich robes embroidered with gold, but his head was missing. And in 1968, Paul VI officially recognized them with the relics relics of Saint the Apostle Peter. And here they are. Scientists are sure that the find in the Church of Santa Maria in Capella is precisely the real relics of the Apostle Peter. The point in this unusual discussion perhaps will put a comparative genetic analysis. After all, it may happen that the results will coincide, or not, time will show. Palace of the King of the World. In 2014, ISIS troops destroyed a historical monument, a tombstone, according to historians, belonging to the prophet Jonah. After the liberation of the territory, archaeologists assessing the damage caused discovered another historical relic under the tomb, the remains of the palace of the powerful Assyrian king Esarhaddon, who ruled around the 7th century BC, whom contemporary historians called the King of the World. 7 surviving clay tablets describe the king and his reign. The inscription, for example, is similar to that made on the gates of the palace in Nineveh, the former capital of Assyria, now in Iraqi territory, and describes Esarhaddon as a great king and mighty king of the world. The ruined tomb of Jonah is located in Mosul, which from 2014 to 2017 remained under the rule of ISIS. On the walls of the palace discovered under it, there are Assyrian bas-reliefs made more than 2,000 years ago. The tomb of Jonah was revered among Muslims for many years because this prophet is also one of the holy prophets of Islam, where he bears the name Yunus. Clay tablets found at the site describe Esarhaddon as the king of the world, who rebuilt the ancient cities of Babylon and Esagil during his reign. At the beginning of the 21st century, the corridors of the palace, buried by time, were used by ISIS for military purposes, and they considered the found ancient artifacts as loot. Old underground tunnel. During construction work to place the fountain on the central square of Vladivostok, Russia, a mysterious tunnel was discovered at a depth of 4 meters. A tunnel with a vaulted ceiling is made of rubble stone and leads in the direction of Vladivostok GUM. Most likely, the tunnel played the role of a drainage system that diverted wastewater from the city towards the sea. Such drainage systems are not uncommon. Diggers know that, for example, there are 160 underground rivers in Moscow, most of which are removed into collectors. The most famous of these underground rivers is the Naglinka. A year ago, during construction work in Kiev, a tunnel was also discovered, which served as a drainage system. In Vladivostok, construction work was temporarily suspended until the value of the object was clarified. It was decided to mothball the outlet of the old drainage system and continue the construction of the fountain. Interestingly, a find was made inside this tunnel. Researchers have found pieces of the 19th century Chinese pottery that date back to the Qing dynasty. This finding may indicate that the tunnel could have been built by hired Chinese workers. Secrets of the largest book in the world. The origin of this ancient gigantic book is unknown. In the Middle Ages, it was equated with the 7 wonders of the world. For over 700 years, this ancient manuscript has fascinated scholars. The existence of the book is associated with a certain legend that should have worried the church, but the truth is that this ancient manuscript was never condemned by the Inquisition. That the church would allow a Bible that portrays the devil sounds like a contradiction, but in this case, it is true. According to one legend, the creation was written by a monk, assisted by the devil himself. Codex Gigas, which means the giant book, is also known as the Devil's Bible. This is the largest medieval manuscript in the world. The true origin of the codex is unknown, but a note in the manuscript shows that it was created as early as 1295 at the Benedictine monastery of Podlasice in Bohemia, today known as the modern Czech Republic. Soon after, the manuscript ended up in another monastery in Brno, near Prague. Later, in 1594, Rudolf II, Holy Roman Emperor, King of Bohemia and King of Hungary, Croatia and Slavonia, took the codex to his castle, where it was kept until it was stolen by the Swedish army during the 30 Years' War. It became a part of the collection of Queen Christina of Sweden. Today, the Bible is kept in the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm. On September 24, 2007, 359 years later, the Swedes gave permission to exhibit the manuscript in Prague. The conditions for the issuance of the code were strict, and the state had to guarantee the Bible in the amount of 15 million US dollars. In January 2008, the Devil's Bible was safely returned to the National Library in Stockholm. This is a truly gigantic book, and naturally, it has been compared to the Seven Wonders of the World in the Middle Ages. The Bible weighs almost 75 kilograms and requires 2 librarians to lift it. The codex has 312 parchment folios, hence 624 pages, and is 890 millimeters high and 490 millimeters wide. The codex includes the complete version of the Bible and is written in Latin. There are also several short texts in the manuscript. The first is the Work of Repentance, a manual for priests with a list of sins and the corresponding methods of atonement. Parts of this work make it clear that it was written by a church leader who committed sins. The code also contains a magical formula on how to overcome evil, unhappiness, and disease. Inside, there is a calendar containing a list of saints and local bohemians. The calendar was used to keep track of the holidays of the church. Everything indicates that this was the life work of one person. According to historians, the scribe in question probably spent as many as 20 years on such a monumental work. The reason why Codex Gigas is referred to as the Bible of the Devil is because there is a depiction of the devil in the large book. The demon lord's portrait is the most famous depiction in the Giga Codex. It is not uncommon to find images of the devil in ancient medieval manuscripts and other works, but this one is slightly different. On the one side, the devil is illustrated alone and takes up a whole page, depicted in an empty landscape, standing between 2 large towers and raising his arms up in the air. He has only 4 fingers and toes. This illustration was painted to depict the devil as the prince of darkness. According to legend, a monk who once lived in a monastery in Podlajice, Czech Republic, was sentenced to death for his sins. To avoid punishment, he promised to write the largest book in the world in one night, which would make the monastery famous. He soon realized the task was beyond his powers, and he called for the help of the devil, who demanded the monk's soul as payment. When the book was finished, the monk drew a picture of the devil to thank him for his support. Legend has it that the monk escaped punishment, but he lost his peace of mind and his life turned into hell. This is a strange world we live in. It can be assumed that the legend of the creation of the world's largest book worried the Pope and the Church, but this was not so. Despite its inconclusive source, this medieval manuscript was never condemned by the Inquisition. On the contrary, it has been studied by a number of scientists.